Will you please stop that incessant whistling? I wasn't even whistling, y'all. What was that about? Right? I am the unknown factor, and I don't whistle, man. I don't even make beats. I just rap on them, right? Because I am that Wade Wilson of hip hop, right? But as per usual, man, this is the questionnaire. We ain't on that hip hop, right? We're on that comic book tip, and man, might have to siphon a few things today. Yeah, really, because that was very, very intriguing. So I cannot wait to get into it with Mohsen Ashraf. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, man. I'm doing well. Thank you. How about
Did I
yourself?
fuck that up? I feel like I fucked it up more than I did. See, because I seen the look in your face, man, and you're like, did he really screw that up more in the intro than he did on the pre-show?
I think you did fairly well. It's pronounced Mohsen Ashraf, but I feel like you rolled with it fairly well.
That's all you damn comic book creators got hard to fucking like. I swear, with comic book creators, it goes one way. Listen, I'm not even kidding you, man. It's either easy, easy, like Stephen Grant,
My name's Tom. Exact.
Mark
Tom
McKinnon,
Williams,
yeah,
or whatever it needs to be.
easy, or it's something that's just like, fuck was that, dude? Like, I'm,
We,
yeah. Talk to me
we
when
got to
you've
keep
been
your
on
readers
three
on your
times.
toes, you
Yeah,
know?
talk to me when you've been on three times, and I'll get your damn name right, man. That's why. And that's literally, I'm not even gonna say that has happened where somebody's like, I was like, yeah, I finally got your name right. Shout out to Nick Marikovich over there doing Dead Romans, right? But that's not what we're talking about today. As I said, man. Firstly, thank you for coming on the show. Man, I kind of just wanna, because you said there's three things you really want to get into. I definitely want to get into what you're doing in Syphon, man. I think it's great. I just got through the first volume. Shout out, thank you for sending me that, man, so I can take a look. Great book, dude. I think it's a very interesting power, and I don't think it's one I've ever seen before. But before we get into that, based on the conversation we were just having before this started, um, the third thing you said you wanted to get into on this podcast, because if y'all go check out the pre-show questionnaires, that's the one question I don't put. Like, if you go check out the pre-show questionnaires over at the Patreon, you can see every question except the last question, which I asked the guest. What three things do you want to most cover during this podcast? That way I, you know, do my job right over here at the questionnaire. But the third thing that you put is very topical at the moment, good sir, as it's peace in the Middle East. And as I'm pretty sure everyone's aware, yeah, that's not going so well at the moment, you know? Um, so with what's going on with Israel and the Gaza Strip and Hamas and everything they've attacked, and it's clustered at the moment, and not to say that there haven't been, God, I don't even know how many confrontations the U.S. has been part of in the Middle East. I could think of like three off the top of my head. I'm sure there's more. Those are just the ones that I can think of real quick. I'm sure there's probably 20. Um, what's your opinion of that situation? Just looking at it, man. Especially if you're
Well,
from
first off,
Afghanistan, correct?
are we allowed to cuss on this show?
I don't give a shit, man. Didn't I tell?
Okay,
Look,
okay,
do
because
you see this shirt? Right, it says "Kill a Factor." America runs on murder. I already pissed somebody off with that right there.
Because, dude, my take is that it's a clusterfuck, and it's been a clusterfuck for a long time. And to boil it down, I think really simply, just briefly, right, is you've you've never had good resolution of how to take care of the people on the ground, right? Because you have an indigenous population, right? The people of Palestine who lived there before, that they've been displaced and they're living kind of under occupation and kind of extreme conditions, and so they're angry, they're upset. Gaza West Strip has been defined as kind of an open air prison, and fundamentally what they want is self-determination and the ability to kind of rule themselves. With that, though, they have to accept the fact that Israel is here to stay, and the people have a right to exist there, right? Now, on the Israeli side, what they want is they want peace and they want security, but that means acknowledging that their neighbors, the Palestinians, live in untenable situations. And the challenge is that the people could want peace and safety and security and equality all they want, but both regimes are led by extremist governments, right? You have the Palestinians led by Hamas right now, and it wasn't always the case, right? But a lot of the previous leadership was killed off or whatnot, so you have Hamas. And I actually likened this to, honestly, Germany in World War II with the rise of Hitler, right? You have a population that is incredibly dissatisfied. They vote in or bring in a party who's going to get things done, and they end up just being fascists and extremists. And so that's what, and Hamas hasn't had elections in the region for, a decade now, right? So you have this extreme policy there. Then on the Israeli side, you have Benjamin Netanyahu and the far right parties that don't want peace. They say they don't want a two-state solution. They just want to keep the situation kind of as it is. And the big fear that for the Palestinians is that, hey, they're going to go the way of the Native Americans of the United States and all the other countries. They're just going to be ignored and kind of left to their own as this other metropolis starts to, develop and burgeon. And fundamentally, I think both parties have established the fact that they can't come to a solution, and they haven't been able to bring about the right, peace settlement. And international powers have tried, but I think you really need an international militaristic solution where you have parties like the United States, Saudi Arabia, whatnot. The UN doesn't have the mandate for this, but parties coming in and really rule that region and bring in civil order, civil law. And my ultimate philosophy, and I know I'm veering off this a little bit, is how the Ottomans used to rule, right? Where they had a civic government that was kind of absolute equality across all, but then you had regional provinces that were run by the populace of the people, right? So in Ottoman times, you had a Jewish quarter, and it was Jewish law that ran kind of religious institutions and whatnot. And so, I mean, I feel like the only way you can do that here is have areas like that at the end of the day.
I mean, because look, when it comes to the Middle East, as far as what I've seen historically, there are two main reasons for conflict in the Middle East. The obvious one is religion, and the other obvious one is oil. I mean, clearly, those are the two things that cause all the conflict. As my dog adjusts my camera for me, let me adjust it back real quick. That cause the conflict within the Middle East. Do you think there's anything else that really?
So you bring up a good point, right? Because oil is the catalyst of what gets people involved. If there's no oil there, nobody's going to give a shit, right? Nobody's in Yemen or whatnot, because that happens. And then religion, I think, is an excuse for other issues, right? It's the factor where you're like, hey, you're different than us. I think what it really comes down to, people have said it's a religious issue, an ethnic issue, political, social. Fundamentally, it's a moral issue. How do you treat other people that are different than you? How do you coincide with somebody? How do you treat them with respect? How do you, acknowledge their right to exist? How do you acknowledge indigenous ties to the land? And that really is just the moral code that, honestly, Islam and Judaism both heavily practice, just people aren't following it.
I wouldn't look for help from Americans, mind you. It's we'll say today is indigenous son of a bitch, dog. My dog is in a mood to adjust my damn camera. What is up with this? She's like, don't say what you're about to say. You're gonna get in trouble. I'm still gonna say it, dog. All right, I'm still gonna say it.
Good point, though. Finish it off because it's a good point.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, it's today. Technically, it's Indigenous People Day. I know that Columbus Day. Whatever. How you gonna celebrate an asshole that? I'm sorry, no one's came. As far as I know, historically, recorded history. Who else has come closer to an actual genocide of a populace?
That's right.
Even though it's not acknowledged, it's really odd that we as a country do not acknowledge that. Mind you, I say this as an American, and now after this episode comes out, the QUESTionnaire gets shut down, and we haven't even gotten into this comic, which is wonderful. Click the link in the description. You should check it out. Volume 2 is getting ready to start. We're going to get into it in a moment.
And I'll tell you the tie-in for that later when we get to that, because what's going on in the Middle East, the issue fundamentally is the inability of people to empathize with the other side, right? Everybody has a lot of turmoil and conflicts, right? The indigenous people, right? Their grandparents were kicked off their land, right? And they've lived, with constant raids and sirens or whatnot. So they have a lot of trauma on their side. And then a lot of, Israelis have, experienced a lot of anti-Semitism or attacks of who they are, and they just want a place to be able to live freely on their side. So they come with a lot of trauma at the end of the day. And the problem is both people are unable to really find commonality and share each other's, experiences on that side. Because it's so, to do so, you have to validate that somebody else has gone through a lot of pain without them validating your pain. And so it feels like an insult to be like, yeah, I know you've been through shit, but you need to tell me that I've been through shit because I've lived it and I want that recognition and experience of that. And if we're able to go do that, that can, I think, help bridge a lot of the gap. And that's part of what the superpower that we'll talk about later does.
It's funny that you say that, though, and to go back to the initial conflict, like, because I was reading up on this a little bit based on the fact that I had you coming up, and I didn't want to be ignorant. I'll be honest, man, I don't follow the news.
Yeah.
I find it depressing.
Yeah.
It hurts my soul. Like right here, dude. Like right here, where your spirit and your essence is. It's just like every time I turn on any news channel, it's just like somebody stabbed me, just at least a little bit, just a little, right? But I noticed in what started this, and I don't mean to kind of smirk, but it's the fucked up irony of it is really weird. And oh Jesus, I am about to get the show shut down. And really, really suspicious, I'll say, in the fact that the first place they attacked is a music festival. Seems very American of them, I'll say.
I mean, dude, you're coming on conspiracy theories of how did this actually fucking happen when Israel's supposed to have the best surveillance intelligence ever, and they were blind to something like this happening, and all the pre-alert alarms, the sirens, nothing went off. Like what happened, right? And it is a big question that I think that people are being asked for, and part of this maybe is Netanyahu's been turning the whole government to the far right and weakening the judicial process. So the whole world, the whole country's been focused on that. Another part of it is a lot of the army's been focused on settler attacks on the West Bank, where there's a lot of settler incursions against indigenous populations. So the army gets called in to go support them or whatever it might be. So a lot of the attention was away from Gaza where this happened. But you bring up a good point because it's like, dude, what the fuck? How did this happen?
I mean, and sincerely, dude, like, it's very American, you know?
Mm.
Yeah, a music festival got attacked. It's a story I would totally expect to see in the U.S. because I've seen it several times in the U.S. You know what I mean? To see it outside the U.S. it's kind of like, well, that's fucked up. Why did, like, of all places you could attack, you know what I mean? You attack the populace that is just trying to enjoy themselves, and they're probably trying to, all right, on one thing or another. That's what you choose as your target, which obviously is not a viable military target.
No, I mean,
It's just, yeah.
That's what's fucked up about this, right? It's like, hey, I completely believe people have the right to self-determination to fight for their freedom, but doing so by attacking military targets, strategic targets to actually, win favor for your cause. I mean, this was pure, just as you would call terrorism, right? Like, it's just like,
I don't. If you have another word for this, it's certainly one that escapes me. And I like to consider myself fairly prolific when it comes to my vocabulary. So, yeah, I mean, it was straight to strike terror into those that inhabit the area.
yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
to your point of three wishes, man, then, like, so for everyone to have the telepathic ability to share their feelings and emotional state with others. Now, I take it in that you clarified that to where you don't want telepaths. You don't want people like that are like Jean Grey, Professor X. I can read your mind and what you did. You just
No.
want people to be able to sense their feelings and their state of being, as far as to be able to address that, so they know how they feel in comparison to the other. Now, I understand it. Do you think if you could suddenly introduce that to the Middle East, what kind of impact do you think it would have overall?
I mean, I think it would be powerful, right? Because for you to, like, let's say, sit down, right, for somebody from, Palestine to sit across from somebody from Israel to be like, hey, let me share what I've been through with you, right? Not just words, but actual, the actual emotional state brainwaves around that, and be able to have somebody download your life experience, the things that you want to share, maybe, right? I think that would be powerful. And then for that other person to do the same. And I think what you'd be left with is just so much sadness and grief, to be like, wow, this, you know, you've been through this. I'm sorry for that. You know, me and my cause have contributed in certain ways. And I think it would just provide such a deeper level of perspective fundamentally. And, you know, it's, you know, what Nelson Mandela said when he was in jail. He's like, you know your enemy, love your enemy. And he really understood. He was in jail for 27 years, and he understood the mindset of, at that time, the white man in South Africa for him. For when he was released from prison, he actively, made changes that would not upset the thinking that these people had. He's very mindful of that, because he's like, hey, now that we're in power, I don't want to inflict the same issues that you've inflicted on me, because I understand you and your perspective. And I think bringing that here would be paramount and powerful.
Well, do you think as well as the opposite of that, though, would have a good effect, as far as them not only being able to sense the bad, but the good in their life?
The good, yeah.
So therefore they would be able to feed off that and be like, oh, well, you see that as good and I see this as good. I feel like you could find more common ground within the good than you ever could the bad. The bad, I think, is going to make you realize the suffering that one another could endure at one another's hands. But I feel like if you tried to focus on the good, which I know we as human beings have a shitload of a problem with, that's an understatement if there ever has been one on the show. But if you could share that, I feel like you could find more common ground in those things.
Absolutely, dude. Absolutely. My father passed away several years ago, and at his funeral, a good friend of mine came, and he's Jewish, actually, and he said that, he's like, hey, your guys' funeral rites are so similar to ours. And I think when you get down to it and share that, there's so much commonality, because Islam is based off of elements of Christianity and Judaism. We all believe in the Abrahamic faith. We all have the same philosophy, right? And again, being able to share that and the good and the common would be like, wow, there's just so much similarity around this. And that's what we as a people, as you always want to do when you meet somebody, you want to find where you have common element. And obviously there's we're all human, we're all this, it's all the good stuff, but we live in a world where it's the divisiveness that really drives us, and that's what we hear with media, and it's those talking points that get distilled into, well, hey, you think this, I think the sky is azure, you think it's cobalt, right? It's fucking blue, who gives a shit, right? But it's just, they'll make us fight day and day about these small things.
Sorry, it's fucking blue, all right? You got me with that one a little bit, man. I ain't even gonna lie. But I think that's funny when you do look at religions. And I mean, we've had discussions on this show in regards to religions. I'm not religious. I do believe that there is certainly something that we are not aware of. But there's a part of me that cannot believe that we have the comprehension level that people think that we do in regards to what it truly is, based on how old this planet is and how young we are as a species. I find it very hard to believe that you can make it palpable to what that really is. Like, fuck, dude, look, if Galactus showed up tomorrow, I'd be like, huh, fuck, that's believable, right? I mean, I would, right? Like, some big ass deity that eats planets. Ain't that a bitch? Anybody got a Silver Surfer handy? But I do think have you read X-Men Disassembled?
I'm not sure I have, actually.
It's the story with Nate Gray, X-Man from the Age of Apocalypse universe.
Yeah.
Where he goes very Messiah-like, I'll say, and certainly has the garb of a Messiah and everything. He even makes his own 4 horsemen, but they're like positive 4 horsemen, even though they do terrible shit. And he makes the council of Kitty Pryde, Apocalypse, and Senator something or other. I don't remember the senator's name. They've done so many senators within the X-Men comic books. I mean, I remember Senator Kelly's because he's featured both prominently in the comics and the films, but I don't remember this particular senator. If it's Kelly, shit, my bad, y'all. I've read it recently and whatever. Life's crazy. But when he's asking Apocalypse what he would do, Apocalypse is like, I would get rid of all of the false deities. meaning all religions.
Yeah.
So, what's your opinion? Like, say that was possible for just religion to be removed. Do you think that would have a positive effect on the Middle East, or, or globally even?
Yeah. So Karen Armstrong wrote a really good book called Fields of Blood. And it looks at the, religion, asking the question, is religion inherently violent? Right? At the end of the day. And, brilliant book, but the end, consensus of this is that, hey, as humans, we're kind of prone to conflict. And we're always going to pick a attribute that separates us from them. Right? Whether it's skin tone, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's country, whether it's a certain belief system, whether it's religion. I think we're always, as humans, and there's going to be people that are going to have differences that will incite conflict. It could be whether it's about how you feel about abortion, how you feel about, taxes. I mean, any sorts of, items on that. So I think if you move, the thing with religion specifically is that it's an emotional topic. I think that's the challenge around that. And it's because people are taught, in a certain way that's almost indoctrinated, right? In certain ways, in a dogmatic way, without really understanding the nuance of the types of belief and where the beliefs come from, right? Because I think most and all religions are philosophies of how to engage with the supernatural, or the things that we don't understand, how to treat other people that are different than you, right? And how to treat the people in your own community. Fundamentally, that's what religion is about. And if you take, all the good of that, there's a lot of positive. There's a lot of guck that comes into, and a lot of that is fire and brimstone. That wasn't the original message that came through after the fact. And fundamentally, I mean, the way I see religion is in the most purest form, the idea that God is a unifying factor, right? That we're supposed to love God. Like I don't like the term God fearing. I like the term God loving, right? If you're religious, right? You love God, and for that, you love your fellow human for the sake of God, right? Is kind of how I look at the world from that lens. And again, of course, the problem is people don't see it that way. They don't fully understand it. It's easy to break things down. So if you did get rid of religion, right, I think you'd remove one element of conflict, but I don't think it would fundamentally change, because it's not about religion, right? Because in the Middle East, you have Muslims, Christians, and Jews that live in Israel, and you have, Muslims and Christians that live in Palestine, right? And if you remove all of them, you'll still have people along the border that have different ethnic issues or different philosophies. You'd still have things for people to fight about fundamentally.
And all that sweet, sweet, sweet black gold. Ooh.
Yep. That's the driving force.
Sorry, it makes my head hurt because this is 2023 now, but I remember reading sci-fi novels when I was a kid, and we were supposed to be beyond oil by now.
Not soon enough, man. Hopefully soon, but natural resources are a bitch, and will always be fighting over them. Honestly, I think the next big battle is going to be water rights in Africa. I mean, that's why China's been buying up all of Africa, building that out. In the next 20, 30 years, that's going to be the next battleground.
Great, so it's going to move from the Middle East to Africa, and then they got to make up reasons to go blow that shit up too, so they can get some water. You just made my head hurt. All right, so and you fucked up my segue, man. So bad. So bad. So bad, right? Because I was going to say, in as far as shit, man, why we got to keep trying to blow each other up? Like, I think, and can I say, I think that's the thing. If you could sincerely, with this country, with this planet, make it to where people's basic necessities were met. Just their basic necessities. You got food, you got water, you got somewhere to live, you got healthcare, right? Like, if you could cover those four things, I feel like that would resolve a lot of conflict.
Absolutely. I mean, all people want to do is live in peace, raise their family. They want to believe what they want to believe faith-wise, right? They want to live in peace and security and feel safe. and feel like there's opportunity for them and their children and their basic needs met. Literally, fundamentally, that's all people want. You're absolutely right. And that's what's not being met in the Middle East because the people of Israel don't have security, right? Again, that just proved this case. And the people of Palestine don't have equality, self-determination, and those basic human rights, right? They just cut off food, oil, and gas, to Gaza and an opportunity from that way, right? And
Now, are
so
you
if you fix
referring
that,
to the European Union doing that?
no, the Israel Netanyahu just said that, or that they're cutting
Okay,
off.
because I
I
know
mean,
they'd said that at one point, but then they went back on that and said they would continue to supply. I think I'm thinking of Palestine actually in regards to when they said that
could
though.
be, could be.
I read a lot really quickly, including a really dope comic that I swear we're gonna get to.
But dude, I love your point. I think you're spot on with your assessment. So
I mean, it would be nice, right? So in that, and in the fact that, like we've discussed, if you could make people feel one another, that sounded really perverse. If you can make people feel one another emotionally, let me add a word so it doesn't, to where they got a sense of one another's beings. I do truly think it would help. Now, in that, you, sir, made a power that I can't think that I've ever seen in comic books.
I don't think it has existed before. The closest I've seen. Oh, go ahead. You're gonna say something.
No, go ahead.
The closest I've seen, people have said like, hey, the Blue Lanterns are similar, but I mean they're empaths, but they're very they're not action oriented. They're very defensive. They need somebody else to go work. The closest I've seen is Raven from Teen Titans that has somewhat empathetic power, but it is, and it's funny. I didn't know anything about her until after the fact, where I was looking like, hey, who else has this? But I feel like no, this is a really new novel power that we came up with.
What was it that made you create that, man? Because, like I said, I mean, I've read comics since I can remember reading. I
Yeah.
started off on Spider-Man, and I've read so much beyond that. Firstly, shout out to Matt Hawkins for being the first guest on the show, as well as Jim Valentino.
Really,
Right?
dude, he's the godfather for Syphon, man. He's the one that greenlit it and says, hey, this looks cool. We'll go make it happen. He's my homie.
Great dude. And go check out his past quest. It was literally the very first quest, and we had a tech issue the first time we recorded it, and I swear the first recording we did was such a phenomenal interview, and it was lost because it for some reason the sound didn't record. This is why I do sound checks now. Actually, it's not, because I had the sound recording fine, and then I lost 2 other episodes, and then I started doing sound checks. If I'm going to be fully honest, because I ain't gonna lie to y'all out there. But yeah, he was enough of a pleasure to come back, man. And I mean, he is a phenomenal individual. He does great work. So shout out to him, as well as Jim Valentino, which is one of the gentlemen that started Image, but you can check out his past quests as well. What was it like pitching that to them, knowing that, I mean, because you've read comics for a while, man. You said when you were growing up, though, you technically only had access to the Transformers, but you obviously went far beyond that, enjoying one of my favorite books, that being The Darkness. Ooh, I love The Darkness. Mike and Garth killed it, man. They killed it.
Mhm.
If there's a Wayne and Garth of the comic book industry, it's Mike and Garth, and that's all I'm saying. You know? But what was it like pitching that? Uh, to Matt Hawkins. For some reason, I was about to say Michael Turner. I got Top Cow on the brain, if y'all can't tell.
Yeah.
And trying to explain that to him based on something that's it's not something that's ever really been seen in comics.
So it's interesting. So I had this idea when I was living in New York City. And I think part of that is, you see a lot of people that really express their emotional state on the streets, right? Not even just like homeless citizens, but literally just people like crying on the phone while they're walking down, or just being angry, just being upset, all this chaos happening, right? And I think there's just a time there's a lot of chaos around the world, which is kind of always the case. And as call myself an empath, but as somebody who wants to help and do more, I was like, hey, obviously you can donate some of your time, but it's like, hey, how could you really help people? How could you really understand somebody? How could you really, be able to uplift somebody and get them out of their condition? And with that, I just got this flash of an idea of a superhero that was a bit like a Spider-Man meets Professor X. Spider-Man in the sense of, somebody who's given a power and is juggling life, personal life, kind of with their situation, but also just kind of a local. And Professor X of having these types of mind powers fundamentally. And so I had this flash of an idea to be like, oh, there'd be such cool power of actually like literally taking people's pain away. And I thought about a character who would go to hospitals and, if kids were, going through cancer treatment and had extreme situations, could you take that pain away from them? But how do you make it interesting is, then you have to live with that pain yourself. And how do you go deal with that? And so I had this idea for a number of years. And I was at Sundance, I was doing some film stuff for a while. And I met Patrick Meany randomly at an event there. And Patrick is a prolific filmmaker now, but he had done comics before. And I was like, hey, dude, let's go do this, right? And he's like, oh, I know somebody who can help us. And with that, we met Henry Barajas, who's a good friend who's done Helm Greycastle and a few other series. And he put us in touch with an artist. And we actually, did some of the work, an issue to be like, hey, this is how we'd want to manifest it. I had a very clear idea of how I wanted the power to manifest, right? As like these waves that come out. And so we did some of that and we pitched it to Matt, right? And Matt instantly got the story. He's like, dude, I think this is a great idea. He's like, this is a great story. I love it. And he's like, it's fresh, it's fun. He's like, I love empaths. I dig that. He's like, I hate the art though. The artist we had used before, he was not a fan of it. It was very much more cartoony. But he's like, hey, I found this artist at a con. It's the only artist he ever found at a con, actually, that he was a big fan of. He's like, let me put you in touch with him. And that gentleman was Jeff Edwards, who is brilliant artist and really brought the story to life in an incredible way.
Oh, yeah, no, the art, and that kind of makes me curious to see the original incarnation of the first issue, to be real honest, man. I'm not gonna lie.
They can share that with you offline.
Yeah, I'm not. That's fine, and then I'll post a picture of it during the interview just so everybody can. I'm kidding. But because the art very much matches the story, as far as the depth of it, because I do feel like with what you've done, you've written a story with great depth. Now I'm curious, man, within this, because you've obviously went into the Top Cow universe, all right, which is extensive, as you know from being a fan of the Darkness. When you knew that this story was going into the Top Cow universe, what were your thoughts on that, man? Because the Top Cow, like the Image universe, it's not intertwined. We had Jim Valentino on. You can listen to that whole quest. Image owns the eye and the name Image, and that's it. Everything else is creator owned. If you ever wanted to make a movie universe of Image, good fucking luck, okay? Because you're gonna have to deal with like 30 people on 30 different books, and it's probably gonna make you want to shoot yourself as a producer. That's the end of it. Now with the Top Cow universe, it's very much different. There is very much an intertwined universe of the Witchblade, the Angelus, the Darkness, all the 12 artifacts, and then you got the Hope story and all of that. When you knew you were getting into Top Cow, especially being a fan of the Darkness, shout out to Phil Hessler, who wrote the Rebirth. You can check out his past quest too. Great dude. I'm gonna keep dropping fucking shit like a motherfucker, man. I can't help myself. I'm sorry. But did you ever think that perhaps this could end up within that universe, being intertwined?
It's interesting you say that. It wasn't an idea that had crossed my mind originally, because my whole thing was like, oh, hey, great. I just want to work with a really great publishing team and good people that understand and will champion the story. That was kind of the impetus. But it's interesting you say that because, when we signed up with Image, I started looking deeper at some of the other stuff I hadn't seen before. And what I saw was a Darkness Batman crossover. And I thought that was super cool, actually, how it came up. And it's funny because obviously Batman's one of my favorite characters. I thought what crossover with Silas in the Syphon series would be the most interesting. And I always thought it would be Batman. it's funny because Mark Silvestri just did the Batman and the Joker, which is my favorite series right now. Brilliantly. And I know you'll get to that because you got that. But when I was chatting with Mark about this at Comic-Con, and I was like, dude, I love this series. And he's like, dude, this is the first time that Batman and the Joker have ever teamed up. Nobody's seen that before. It was super novel. Striking art, incredible. And I was like, hey, by the way, I've had a... And I was like, hey, would you consider more crossover? He's like, hey, if it's the right story. I'm like, I have an idea for you. I have a Silas Batman crossover, and I'll tell you why. People have always asked the question, who is Batman? Who's Bruce Wayne without Batman? Who would Bruce Wayne be without the trauma of losing his parents? And I thought of a story where Silas goes to Gotham for a reason. And with that, he starts doing what he does, his vigilante justice. And Batman is like, no, you're in my territory. And they fight. And Silas unleashes a bunch of shit on Batman. And Batman's like, dude, I've dealt with this crap. You give me pain. You give me, bullshit. I've dealt with the Scarecrow. So the Silas is like, okay, fine. I can't put pain on you. What if I take away your pain? What if I take away the trauma of you losing your family, losing your parents? And then you introduce the idea of who's Batman then? Who is Bruce Wayne? Without that darkness, that pain, trauma kind of dictating his life.
Please, Michael, get this story greenlit. And I say that as, look, I'm personally, when it comes to the comic industry, I'm more of a fan of the other than I am of the big two. Mind you, you should say big three because Image has definitely established itself as a powerhouse, especially with what Kirkman's done with all the properties that he's created.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty ridiculous how much Image is out there, and I don't think people realize it. But between the big two, I was always more of a Marvel guy. And when it came to DC, I looked at their two big guys, and I was like, one's really truly unbelievable, and one's a narcissistic asshole who really needs therapy. Right? All right. And obviously, through your laugh, you know which one is which, right?
Yeah.
So to take the one that is a narcissistic asshole and put him against that power, I feel like you would kind of break him to a certain degree.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. And it's because, the mask that Bruce Wayne wears is Batman, right? That's his whole identity. So if you take that away, you literally do break him. You break him down. You break his entire sense of identity. And we've never dealt with that. We've never seen that before. And what would be interesting to the same is then how would Silas, the person who takes Batman's pain, how would he respond to that? Would he take the mantle then? Yeah, exactly.
Yo, Michael, please make this story happen. Please. I really, really, really want to read this now because it's seriously, I think it's become one of my favorite could be what if crossover stories that I've ever heard. And I could sit here and throw out all kinds left and right. Like, I'd love to see a Deadpool Evil Ernie. I think that'd be hilarious. I'm not going to lie. But Silas and Batman, there's something there between the chemistry, the fact of Silas's power and Bruce Wayne, who he is, and he's a brooding. Yeah, we won't go in any farther because, like I said, I've just never been much of a fan of the Batman. I'm a firm believer. If it wasn't for his rogue gallery, I don't know if he'd ever gotten as big as he is.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you give him the rogue gallery of someone that can remove his pain, but then the fact that they have to take it, but at the same time, Silas might be like, oh, and completely assimilate that in a different way, to where he don't have to go beat up poor people.
If that'd be interesting to look at. How does he take that, right? Like, absolutely. And that's, I mean, that was a lot of the arc of Volume 1, right? Where Silas has taken on all these people's pain, and it just wears him down, right? He deals with everybody's, negativity, trauma, all that, and it starts wearing him. It's stressing him out, right? He gets older, he gets worn, and it's things that we deal with in our daily life. If somebody throws you a lot of shit, a lot of poison, right? That's what happens. And I mean, the question that we're all trying to deal with is how do you balance that, right? The good with the bad. How do you? Some people meditate, some people work out. How do you deal with that in a healthy way?
I mean, that's definitely true. And I'm sorry, I'm really just my brain is stuck on the Batman Silas thing. I can't get over it.
Right? I
Right?
mean,
So
I
let's
think it'd be
flip it.
cool, man. I
So
think
let's
we
flip
write
it. I dude, I
Mr. Dream of
definitely think
Batman to be
you
like,
should.
hey.
Yeah, I definitely think you should write that out and pitch it. I I think it's a very interesting concept. And it's something that's never been done to Batman, I think, quite like that, or at least not that I know of. Somebody's gonna be like, "Shut up! That was done in issue 6,352," and then
I
I'll
don't know,
find
man. I
out it
think
was
we're gonna
5
have to
years
ask Jim
ago.
Lee and be like, "Hey, homie, can we go do this?" I dude, imagine that with Mark Silvestri's art. Oh, wild.
Mm. Yeah, because look, Mark's everything I've seen from Mark, he's killed. I mean, like I said, I've been a fan of Mark for a long time. I remember when Top Cow initially became a thing. So within that, let me ask you, let's spin this question, man. Who do you think is the most interesting character within the Top Cow universe for Silas to
Hmm.
interact with?
I mean, I think Jackie, right, would be the spot on, right? Because dude, he's been through so much, right? And like, it's the thing where I think Jackie's dealt with more of this shit than anybody, right? Because he was born through, this tough situation. He literally went, and then he's given this power. He's literally gone through hell physically, right? And then come out on the other side. And so he, you know, has been through trauma and pain and suffering, and he's still been able to like come out. And what's so interesting about him is being an anti-hero, right? I mean, the thing with, the big blue for DC Superman, he's just so square, dude, right? It's like, dude, there's good and evil. No, there's plenty of fucking gray, right? And that's what we introduced in the story, and I think that's what the darkness shows. Like Jackie sometimes fights against jealousy, fights against, and he uses moral disambiguity to steer him in a lot of ways, right? So be able to get a deeper sense of that, I think would be super interesting.
Firstly, I'm so glad that we agree because that's exactly based on what I've read of the Darkness. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of the Darkness. I mean, I've been a huge fan of Garth Ennis for a long time. I think the man is a phenomenal writer, and just I continued to read the Darkness throughout. God, I don't know. I've read a lot of the Darkness. I could get back here and start grabbing issues, but I ain't gonna do that to you, man. Um, and I think he is the perfect character for Silas to interact with and within the Top Cow universe because there's been so much within his life. Now, I'm curious, do you think Silas could absorb all of his pain and be okay?
I
Because
don't think
that's a
so.
lot.
No, dude, I think that's what would break him, right? I think, and again, that's why I think Jackie'd be so interesting because I think he's dealt with so much more than Silas or anybody else has to be able to take on that. I mean, I think it'd be cool. I mean, well, now we'd have to get into the psyche of Jackie, right? But if 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 you could compartmentalize some of that, it'd be like, hey, if Silas could take parts that was needed for Jackie to go do something else he needed to go do without being worn down, and or giving stuff that Silas would need to go do stuff. I think it'd be a good pairing to be like, hey, we need to go take this guy on, but we need to play to our strengths. So that means you do this, I do that kind of deal. Like that could be interesting to look at.
See, so I know you said Batman, which I do think is a very, very interesting dynamic. But I really think with what you've written here
Yeah.
and knowing what I know of the character Jackie Scotto, that's a very interesting team up. And I'm pretty, is the Darkness doesn't have a running series right now, right?
I don't believe so. I thought they were going to do a re-release uh,
Hey,
of something coming out. I mean, it's nothing. Yeah, because Matt Hawkins wrote something I think a year or two ago for this, but I'd have to check the latest.
I mean, I've got an interesting Darkness pitch that I gave to Phil Hessler And I told him if he wants to write it, go ahead. But it's nothing that you could do as far as interacting with him, because what I was referring to was something where, here's the darkness at the creation of man, and suddenly this man has this power, and he exists for a couple thousand years, and he's the reason man started to evolve because, he's just there learning shit for way longer than he should have been. It's the long and short of the pitch that I gave to Phil. You can check out Phil's interview, like I said, for more information on that. But I do think there's a definite possibility, especially just based on the powers they have. Now, I'm really curious, in all honesty, especially how you ended the end of Volume 1, where that's going to go as far as where this power comes from. Because there's obviously a number of things that you haven't divulged. And now, like I said, there's 12 artifacts within the Top Cow universe. And with what you've divulged within this story, I feel like it's something that could be added within that, where it was a primordial force. Not necessarily an artifact, but here's a force that's just, and suddenly everyone's aware of it because, this asshole was kind of keeping it under lock and key through what he was doing. It wasn't necessarily, so, it didn't end up in the artifact series and all this coming about. But I feel like it's something that could create an arc to where you could do something like that and build off of this.
Bring up a very good point, because that's part of what Volume 2 goes through.
Oh,
right. And so I see this first entire story arc being 3 volumes, right? So we did Volume 1, Volume 2 is about to come out. Volume 3, I already have a good idea as to where I want to go, and it'll all tie together, right? Like very well, kind of like the original Batman series with Christopher Nolan, kind of just nightly, really, really well done on that front. And so what we wanted to do with this, right? Because the challenge with Volume 1 is we had only 3 issues to introduce a new power.
That's rough.
A new superhero and a new supervillain. Right? So it's like you got to hit hard, keep it going to make something compelling. And with that, we weren't able to get deeper with the main characters, right? Specifically Silas and even Livia, right? Because we want her to be a bigger part of this world, and she'll play a very important role later on. And so first, we're able to get deeper with these characters, right? Like Silas, what really drives him, right? What is his purpose with this power, right? What is his intent with this? He's just been using it based off what he thought was the right thing and what other people tell him. Like, what does he actually think is the right way to use this power, right? We need to get into that first, right? And then with Livia, looking at what drives her, what's her motivation. She's actually a neuroscientific researcher, right? So she's very intelligent. She studies the brain, studies the mind. And we're going to see her actually do a lot of scientific analysis about the power and about the elements around that, which I think would be super interesting to kind of balance out the more spiritual, mythological side. Because then, to your point, we're actually going to get deeper with the power itself, exploring more of its history, exploring, like, seeing other Syphons, how they've used the power in the past, and touching more closely of what is the ultimate source for the power. And not to spoil too much, but I'm a big fan of mythology. I love tying that in with primordial forces. And again, it really is, how do we explain and connect with the supernatural? And that's a lot of how the power comes in. And what I'm excited to show, we'll touch upon in this volume, and then even the next one more so, is what are the right ways to use the power? How is it used before in a traditional indigenous setting? How was it a powerful vehicle for communities to explore instead of individualistic?
I mean, I'm assuming, and I hope I'm not making an ass out of myself here, but I'm assuming you've of the Tales of the Witchblade and the Tales of Darkness series.
Yep.
I mean, you very much set this up to where you could do Tales of the Syphon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, dude, it's crazy because once this issue comes out, this volume comes out, I was thinking of doing an offshoot of having a tale of a very specific Syphon that completely separate, tied to this, but speaking to a different audience. Because you're absolutely right? I use the example of Avatar: The Last Airbender, if you've seen that. I mean, one of my favorites.
I've seen the movie. I know of the show. I've never.
no. You. Oh my god.
I
The
look,
movie's
I
so
know the
bad.
movie is trash. I know the movie is trash. Just like I know the Dragon Ball Z movie is trash. I watched Dragon Ball Z. I haven't taken the time to watch The Last Airbender. 'Cause- dude, time is finite, all right? Because like I'm not
Yeah.
watching
Yeah.
fucking
That's
One
fair.
Piece. You feel me?
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
But note
But
that,
it's just.
like, at least Airbender, yeah, at least shut up. I'm not watching the fucking One Piece show, babe. I don't know. I'm fucking not. I'm not fucking. God damn it. I'm not fucking. She's trying to tell me I'm watching One Piece, man. I'm not fucking
Yeah.
watching One Piece. Are you shitting me? At least the last Airbender ends at like 500 episodes, doesn't it?
It. It's actually only 60 episodes. 3 seasons.
The whole series?
I mean, they've made the new one, but don't worry
Well,
about that. Just
yeah.
watch the original, dude. Just the original's the best. It's on Netflix. Dude, honestly, some of the best TV you'll ever watch. Best cartoon show you'll ever watch.
Man, can I just say I'm gonna leave that up in the air because you're saying 60 episodes at 22 minutes apiece, so that's like days worth of like look, dude, I gotta edit this show. Do you want your episode to come out within 6 months? I still got fucking so much shit I gotta drop as it is, man. Don't be giving me like I try to keep up with AEW, and that is the only wrestling because yeah, no, I ain't got time for side quests right now until I can afford a fucking editor. You feel me? And I'm not the only person doing the show. When I got a
Oh,
team of 3 people, give me more side quests by all means. That's all
yeah,
I'm saying.
yeah.
Oh man, I thought you said, man, I was done rambling. Sorry, I know I
Oh no,
rambled.
I'm waiting. I'm waiting for you to go on to what's next.
What's next? I thought you were comparing as far as the last Airbender in this. I thought you were going to elaborate
Okay.
more on
Just
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
just in the sense that hey, they, you know, in that show, the powers come every generation, and so you can go explore different, you know, avatars in that case. And in this, slightly different focus. We don't do it generationally, but there are Syphons that have existed in the past, and actually Silas will get introduced to some of the best Syphons in the world. Kind of, he'll find an artifact, if you will, that gives him access um, to understand the philosophy and actions of previous Syphons, and what drove them, and give him insight in terms of how he can use his power for himself to carve it out.
it's very intriguing because, like I said, I know a lot about the Top Cow mythos. Obviously, with Hope being the 13th artifact and how that story went within the artifact series. Do you feel it's possible within that mythos to just add a little something new? Because I mean, I know within what's available within the artifacts, there's nothing similar to the power that you have. Because, like I said earlier in the interview, I'm pretty sure, like, I've never read anything to that exact ilk. I mean, I can think of things that were kind of close, but not quite like that. So it would definitely add something different to the Top Cow universe as far as within a whole. Um, I man, I look. I just keep envisioning stories that you've got like the whole Top Cow universe coming together for some big, crazy event again. Which I love events. I can't lie. As long as they're done properly. Some of them suck. That's just the way of it, though. You can't. You should make as many comics as come out today. Some of them are just gonna be kind of bad, at least to certain people. I'm sure there's certain people that enjoy it, and that's fine. But with what you've done, you add a dynamic. Like if you could make it the Angelus and the Darkness see one another's sides.
So when I think about the origin of this power, I do think of two opposing and complementary entities fundamentally. Because if you look at the Angelus, darkness, light side of the power, dark side of the power, heaven, hell, God, devil, whatnot, like it's all it's all these two halves. right? That exist in the world, and we see that play out through, including in this Mideast conflict, right? And I think what we're introducing here, and I think I haven't seen this done well, right? I love Star Wars, but I feel like they've completely lost. I should say completely, but they've, and the sequel trilogy had the chance to do this, to explore the nuance of the light side and the dark side, that they can coexist, not on a cosmic scale, but in an individual, because you have to be able to know what it is. You have to have a bit of the dark in you to understand it, to relate to it, to know how to fight it, to how to champion it, how to suppress it, if you will, right? And they've never really covered that, And
Not to
you have the gray
interject.
Jedi.
Yeah, not to interject, but I think they may be doing that with Ahsoka right now.
Dude, Ahsoka's brilliant. Yes. So I think they're I think they're getting in with that more so. And you see that coming out with Sabine and Balin Skoll, right? You're like, is he good? Is he bad? What's the deal? Right. So I think they're finally getting into that. They've never done that before. And so I'm excited to see that, because I think the Grey Jedi is super interesting. Even with the darkness, right? You have the Angelus, you have darkness. It's kind of two opposing forces. But what we really want to explore in this, and I think this is a journey Silas is on, is how do you have a blend of those? Right? Like, how do you take pride and shame? And we're going to cover a lot of that in volume 2. They're on a spectrum, right? They're all on, call it the narcissistic spectrum. But if you have, and some pride is good, it leads to self-confidence, right? And some shame is good, it connects you with your integrity. But too much shame and too much pride is bad, right? And I feel like most emotions we have, like some sadness is good, it feels you connected to, the grief you have and relationships, and so it's like you can't have one without the other. But most cases haven't shown you how can you blend those in a way that actually works. And you're right, with Ahsoka, we actually saw a touch of that with Anakin in The World Between Worlds, where he flashes between the two. And so that's what we're really excited to explore in this, because I feel like a lot of people haven't taken that nuance. It's either black or white, and how do you fight that?
I mean, that's definitely true. I think, like everyone wants to, if you get to that point, they're like, oh, well, then there's gray. There's not just balancing, this is dark and this is light, and we all have a bit of each. Because we do as human beings. I'm a firm believer. Every human being has a bit of light and a bit of dark. Whether it's more dark or more light, hell, it depends on the person. Are we talking the dude that's just giving money to the homeless guy and not filming it for a fucking TikTok, compared to Jeffrey Dahmer? Like, there's levels. That's all I'm saying. I know those are both really extreme, but there are certainly levels to that. And yeah, I can't think of a story that's gone with that directly without getting into a gray area. Man, how do you write a story like that without noting the gray area, though? That seems difficult as all hell.
Well, you got to keep reading and see how it unfolds.
That was rude, man.
Got to keep you on your toes with this too, my man.
Like, fine. Fine. Yeah. So when is Volume 2 releasing?
November 15th.
November 15th. All right. I ain't, man, like, I ain't gonna lie. You're probably gonna get a bit of a rush edit. I hope I don't make anybody mad by that. But that's more than anything based on the fact that kind of started off on something that was fairly topical.
And controversial, man. If anything, that's going to get you more people to tune in to be like, what are they saying about this? Is like, because you got to talk about real deal shit, right? And the whole comic is talking about mental health and emotional support and how to go deal with that. So I mean, the comic does that too, fundamentally, and that's the stories we like, the ones that speak to actual everyday issues, which is why we love Spider-Man, right? Like, he's just the kid who's dealing with everyday shit, right? Which is why you probably feel a little more disconnected from Superman and Batman, because they're just these larger-than-life characters that are unbelievable in certain ways, right? So how do you have characters you can actually identify with and be like, oh, that could be me?
Look, man, I identify with Wade Wilson more than anybody.
Yes.
So we won't talk about my fucking psyche, all right? We'll just say that it's kind of fucked. When I look at Wade Wilson and go, I get that, dude. And mind you, I'm not saying I get that dude because I've seen Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2. I
Yeah.
get that dude because I've read and I love. Here, we'll get it. How much of a Deadpool fan am I? Do you see how big this fucking comic is?
Damn.
That's not a normal sized graphic novel, right?
So you're a fan, dude. Again, because he's real. He's the real deal, right? Like that's fun to see.
He's a. I mean, I don't know that I necessarily like. He's a very tragic character. You know what I mean? In the fact of what he went through, and then he became what he became, and then he was a villain for a while, and he's like, "Oh, I want to be a hero," and everybody's looking at him like, "Listen, you fuck up. Would you go over there?" And me and Sean Damian Hill had this whole discussion. Him and Bishop share this in common. Everybody look at them. Everybody looks at those two and goes, "Look, we don't need you. Go over there, man. I just want to help. Look, we don't need you. Go over there. I just want to help. Look, we don't need you. Go over there. I just want to help. Holy fuck, man, we really, really need you. Would you come here?" Right? That's literally what happens with both of those characters,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
it's kind of sad, that's how it relates as far as in that. And I think it's sad in that most people have a tendency to relate to characters like that because of how we are. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that as a species overall, man, we don't focus enough on the mental health of
Yeah.
one another. We
Yeah.
we are far more apt to be like, oh, you're going through that? Oh man, that sucks. But hey, let me tell you about,
My
you
shit.
know,
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
I, man, I'm really like, there's part of me that your third wish, which, like I said, you all can go on the Patreon, check out all his wishes. It's kind of terrifying.
it. That's kind of what it's meant to do. Because that's when you want fundamental change, right? If you really, because it's funny because when you ask about these wishes, people are like, oh, I want to wish for world peace. I want to wish for this. I want to wish for that. It's like, oh yeah. So how do you get that? How do you fundamentally get there? And the thing with peace is it requires compromise, a lot of compromise, and that compromise results in sacrifice, which means you need to give something up, right? And the question is, what are you willing to give up for that peace?
So Memphis Quinn, who came on the show a while ago, didn't answer his three wishes question. And I was like, man, what the shit was that? All right. Like, I was offended. How you not gonna answer that question? So we got into it. He's like, man, nobody wants me to answer that question. I'm like, so he's like, so essentially he wants to make it to where there's a global healthcare where everybody has the same healthcare, phenomenal, and a global income, you know. And in the conversation we had throughout, and you can check out this quest; it's already up. Uh, we divulged the fact that if you made everybody the same status like that, there are people that will start war over that instantly, right? Now, me being the dickhead that I am, right? I was like, check it. Here's what you do. So you do those two things, and then you make them all little people, right? All right. Now I want you to think about this, man. Say that really happens, right? Suddenly you got global healthcare, so everybody's taken care of mentally and physically.
Yeah.
You have global income, so everybody can provide what they need to them and their families as far as house, clothing, food, all of this. It's not a problem, right? Now that's going to want people to go to war to gain more like they had. But then suddenly everyone's a little person. How the fuck you gonna run the tank and the F-16?
Yeah. Yeah.
I just, I don't know, man. It amused me apparently way more than it amused you. Fine. Come on, dude. You couldn't tell me that wouldn't be hilarious. A bunch of
That would be
soldiers
kind of
getting
funny,
told to
actually.
look, go man all this shit that's made for people that are like from 5'9" to 6'2", like I am. Suddenly you got a bunch of little people that are like 3'4" running up like, damn, I can't reach none of the levers. So nobody can fight. you would really, between those three things, kind of solve a lot of things, and I think it would be funny.
You would solve a lot of problems, actually.
But everybody would be really fucking short, and nobody could reach the top shelf anymore.
That would solve a lot of issue.
Yeah.
We're not as drunk, that is the root of a lot of this shit as is. So.
What, people not being able to reach the top shelf?
Exactly. That's where you keep the good stuff.
Oh shit! Sorry, I go askew from my point like a motherfucker. I am the unknown factor. What are you gonna do? But sincerely, man, I really do like what you've done here as far as creating this original power. My brain don't know where else to take this except like I kind of want to talk more about the whole everything that's going down in Israel, but I don't know if we can take that point any farther, to be real honest, because it's God, why does this world got to be so screwy, man? You think, how about this? You think if we just introduce superheroes to this planet, like just all of them, what do you think it would do?
Well, have you seen
Cross?
Watchmen or The Boys?
Well, I've seen and read both of them, man. Come on.
Yeah.
Like, if I look, I
think
told
it
you I
would
was a
do-
huge Garth Ennis fan, and then I run this show. I better damn well at least read The Watchmen. You know, if I haven't, I shouldn't be running this show. It's funny, to that point, though, you have no idea how many people have answered that for the worst movie based on a comic.
Yeah.
It's
and it's partly because I think they've done such a good job with a lot of the newer stuff, but also because that comic was so epic, it was hard to really capture it in that movie, and so it was like not doing it justice. I mean, I think the TV series really brought it to point because, I mean, dude, just learning about the Tulsa Massacre, I was like, I'm a huge fan of history. I've studied all sorts of history. I've studied U.S. history. I never learned about that until I saw Watchmen, the TV series. I was like, how is that fucking possible? I'm like, dude, this can't be real. But that was the entire point. We're like bringing real social issues to the table. Right? That's what that comic did. And also the emotional issue and instability of comic book of superheroes. That's what Watchmen introduced. Right? And you see them play that now, obviously, with The Boys and Gen V and whatnot, but that was kind of the OG piece of it. And so when you talk about bringing comic book heroes to the main stage in this world, I mean, dude, they would just get as fucked, because they would fall under the same types of extremist beliefs that certain people have for a fight for certain sides, to be like, oh, I believe in this because that's the right thing to do, and I believe in this. And then I just feel like it would lead to more ruckus.
Real quick, you bring up the Tulsa Massacre, which I was previously aware of through an associate of mine within the hip hop community. He'd informed me of it, and I looked it up, and I was like, this is fucked. Like, the fact that this happened is, and the fact, not even that it's not taught in every history class as far as at a high school level in this country is kind of pitiful. You know what I mean? I feel like it's something that should definitely be on the board. When they did it in The Watchmen, part of my brain went, I wonder how many people will watch this show and go, oh, they must have just made that up, and have no idea that it was a historical event. Because obviously the squids raining from the sky isn't a historical event. But the Tulsa, Oklahoma massacre, go Google it, y'all. It's not pleasant.
Dude, you know what else was interesting was I was in New York last week seeing friends, and we went to the Met, and there was an exhibit from an African American artist, and it talks about in Central Park back in the late 1800s, there was a thriving Black community called the Seneca Village. And the state wanted to turn that into what we know as the park today. So they pretty much gave these people no warning and just started just bulldozing and just knocked down this vibrant Black community. that had churches, graveyard schools, a bunch of houses. So what happened in Tulsa, unfortunately, isn't an isolated incident. It's when you've had thriving indigenous, minority communities, they kind of get shut down. And then people are like, hey, well, why can't these people get themselves out of their ruckus? Well, hey, when they have, it's gone like literally shut down. And again, that's coming back to that's what has been happening around the world. That's what happens in parts of the Middle East. But it just minority indigenous communities, a lot of they deal with a lot of ruckus from the moral majority that have the might and the power.
I mean, that's what we went into at the beginning of the show. It's literally happening in Benghazi and Israel right now as we're talking. I hope everyone's okay. I know a lot of people aren't. That really sucks. Hoping that they can do some. I don't know. You can get into conspiracy theories with that. Like I said earlier, as far as that first attack seems really American. To God knows what else. I mean, there's oil to be there. There's the fact that the Gaza is literally considered a holy Mecca right there, where all people want to be as far as certain religions. There's so many different things. And I mean, you see that same thing throughout the entire world, especially like you said, when you see a black community, there's several instances within the U.S. where they've set up a thriving community. And then all of a sudden it's, just kind of bulldozed or bombed out of the way or however they did it in that particular moment. I mean, even we as America, there's a reason this shirt says America runs on murder. I mean, this country was set up through the closest recorded history of any people really getting genocided. I think that's a word. But I mean, there's no other closer case. I mean, everybody says Hitler and he attempted genocide. Well, shit, we did it way better over here in the U.S. than he ever did.
You want to hear what's fucked up? There's a book called Caste. I forget the author's name, but it was on Oprah's book club. And essentially talks about, the idea of institutionalized racism in kind of society and the caste system that exists. But what they talk about the history of some of it, and they talk about when the Nazis were rising to power. They wanted to see how the United States had institutionalized racism, but still had such a prominent reputation on the world stage. And they're like, hey, how can we do that? Because they were going to do the same thing to Jews and gypsies and all sorts of other groups. And so they studied state laws in the United States to be like, how do they define somebody who was black? And they use that to eventually define how do they define somebody who is Jewish, right? And what their philosophy was, I think if you had 3 or 4 grandparents that were Jewish, who were technically classified as Jewish, but I mean, later down the road, it was just anybody with any blood, right? Which is this fucked up regime that they had. In the United States, it varies too, where in some states, if you have 1 drop of black blood, you're considered black. And if you had like some percentage of it, and then there's segregation rights, where up until like even a lot of state codes right now, they're like, hey, interracial marriage is still technically not allowed by state law because they just never updated it. And so the Nazis took inspiration from old America about how to go do these things. It's kind of wild.
Why do you think it is that we as a country like to put ourselves so forward as forward thinking? Yet if you really look at the history, we're ass backwards in a lot of things, to say the least.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of civilizations, some of the greatest civilizations have had that philosophy. If you look at the Greeks, even the Romans, right? The Greeks, look at the Spartans. They're like, oh, look at us. We're a great militaristic society. But they had an entire population of people that were just slaves, the Helots, right? If you look at the Romans, incredibly, just 2,000 years of dominance across military, arts, architecture, whatnot, right? But they had a slave population that was 5 times their own population, right? But they didn't see that because they're like, hey, look at us, the greatness that we have. These other people just aren't at our level, and I feel like that's how this was started too, in certain ways, right? Where you had a lot of greatness and a lot of ideas and a lot of brilliance and a lot of passion and enthusiasm and patriotism and ingenuity. But again, there's this underlying philosophy that, oh, there's a group of people that just aren't the same place as us. And it's hard to weed out. It's something that carries through with you at the end of the day.
You know what my whole opinion of that is? To hell with that, because your favorite genre of music is rock, and without my favorite genre of music, your favorite genre of music does not exist.
What's your favorite genre?
Hip hop.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Right on.
hip hop, which stems from R&B, jazz, all of that. And without all of those things, neither of those exist. But
Mm-hmm.
one is considered very much part of the black culture, even though it's really weird that you see so many MCs nowadays being like Eminem's the GOAT, which is I think it's funny because I've seen some of the greatest MCs admit that. But look, when you grow up in that and that's what you're around, and then you study your fucking ass off to be as lyrical as that dude is, that's just the fucking case, man. Not that, and I mean, Dre will tell you that shit, like that motherfucker right there. But without Dre, I don't think Eminem would have ever reached that level. It's kind of funny because of the fact that he was white. But the second he had Dre behind him, it was a whole thing of oh shit.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's a really really weird balance within that, man. But if you look at Elvis, dude, you're telling me without the blues and jazz, you think Elvis Presley would have ever existed?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you know what?
Everybody builds off of one another, right? And they take the good and that's what societies have done, civilizations. If you look at old Mesopotamia, like that's everybody did. They conquered, they learn, then they build off of that. And that's the Greeks learned from the Egyptians, the Romans learned from the Greek, all of Western Europe learned from the Romans, we learned from the Western Europeans, everybody, learned from the Islamic age at that time too. It's all just fed off each other.
Why do you think to learn from one another we're so apt to destroy?
It's a good question, man. It's a good question, right? And it's I think it's the way we've okay, there's another really good book that is I know you're not gonna have the time for this.
Look, I
Uh,
might have time for a book, man. I love to read. I ain't gonna lie. It's just like when I'm watching something, there's very few things I watch, and I keep it very specific. And I follow the MCU, and I ain't gonna lie, that's a shitload of goddamn time as it is. And I love the
yeah.
boys as well. Anything like if they put out something that's one of Garth Ennis's comics, I'm fucking watching it. Unless they do Crossed. If they ever do Crossed, I'm
You're
boycotting
it.
it. I don't want to. I don't want to know. I don't want to see that fucking shit in live action. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, yeah, that's actually probably fair. That's probably fair. I mean, ask a really big question, right? And I mean, part of it could be like, oh, we're just prone to conflict. Part of it could be we are in this dog eat dog world where we all think that there's scarce resources, so we have to fight for our keep and for what we want. And I think that fundamentally goes back to the way that societies have turned to develop. They weren't always like this. But there's a book called The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity. And it's a book that literally upends our entire understanding of societies as we know it. Because we think of us moving from hunters and gatherers to agriculturalists. That was that evil we picked to industrialists, now this digital age. But this book upends a lot of that to be like, historically, we didn't move so linearly. There was huge swaths of hunters and gatherers that existed at the same time that agriculturalists existed. And even those hunters and gatherers lived in a lot of different societies where some of them had institutionalized government, some of them had like haphazard government, some of them had women in charge, some had men in charge, some had like equal balance of power, some had slavery, some didn't have slavery. And a lot of those they actually talk about in California, specifically native tribes. There were two different tribes. One practiced slavery, one did not. And what was it? And it came down to their economic resources. The ones that were on the river had fish and other things versus other ones that had other elements. And it was like when you would ransack societies, what could you run off with essentially? and that in some way helped develop the idea of whether you had slavery or not, right? So it was just, we had this whole hodgepodge of how societies were structured. And I think fundamentally what changed that is when you started having empires, right? Because then you started building upon, you know, this need for more resources with this mentality of scarcity and militaristic domination to control larger swaths of the population. And once you have one empire build up, then there's just competition that flows in. And I think historically we just haven't got out of that mindset. At the end of the day, it's a zero-sum game for people, if you will. And I think that's what our generation is trying to fight against in a lot of ways. And it's tricky because everything's so much more global. And now we have these sound bites that, hey, if you think this and I think that, then we're just not going to agree fundamentally, right? That just wedges that divide, which is an extreme case of that, but that's kind of what we live in right now.
Yeah, motherfuckers can't agree to disagree for shit anymore, if that ain't an understatement. But I'll tell you,
but and still have the respect of it, right? Like,
yeah.
And you see that in politics, right? I mean, if you look at the political debates 20, 30 years ago, you know, people were very civil, be like, hey, I might not agree with you, but this is my philosophy, right? Like, and it was very cultural discourse. Now it's like, no, you're dumb, you believe this. No, I believe this. It's very feisty, you know, and it's just sad state of the world we live in.
Well, and to go back to what you were saying about empires, I think it's funny that one of the greatest statements that I've heard, you know, learn learn history so we don't repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That is the purpose of learning history, so you don't repeat its greatest failures.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look throughout the span of human history, I would kind of say the U.S. is repeating one of the greatest fallacies that man has done again and again and again and again. And too many times. I'm not going to say again that many times. In being that you create a society, you create a ruling class. The ruling class wants more and more and more and more and more and more, and then the rest of the class just gets less and less until the rest of the class looks at the upper class and goes, fuck you. And then that empire ends.
Yep. That's how a lot of the old societies lived. You had a warrior society that was like a warrior class is like, no, I'm not gonna do this work. I'm gonna have other people do this work, and it's just built from there.
Why do you think it is we can't learn from that one particular piece of history that's again been repeated I don't know how many times throughout the span of human history, and there's fucking record of it?
I think because we are the descendants of the people who won, if you will. So we're programmed to have this philosophy that, oh, well, hey, it worked for us because we came in stronger, heavier, harder, and those people prospered and the other people died. And we have that blood in us fundamentally. So it's deprogramming our basic historic ancestral right.
It's a very intriguing answer, and I'm afraid to think of how true it probably is. To be real honest, man. I mean, and I mean that fully sincerely, because history is written by the winners. I would hate to think that if you could somehow get all the losers of every war, mind you, a lot of them are dead, so that's not going to happen. But to write their perspective of that particular conflict and then see them both, I would imagine that we would have a far different view of history than we do now. You know, I mean, me personally, I prefer Mel Brooks' History of the World, if I'm going to be real honest. That shit's funny, but, you know, it's not really accurate.
Dude, I do want to do time check because I do have to actually roll out relatively soon.
See, look, hey, I know. See, I already knew that was coming. Now I have to make an edit, right? But that's fine, right? Because, like I said, for everyone out there, look, I want you all to check all the links in the description, man. Syphon is a very original book coming from Top Cow, man. Approved by Matt Hawkins. And if Matt Hawkins approves it, I definitely think y'all should check it out, man. I'm serious, man. I'm very curious to see, especially with how that first volume ended. And that little tease at the end. I'm not going to give it away. Y'all go check out volume 1 before volume 2 drops. Where you take this and where he could be taken within the entirety of the Top Cow universe, because it's very expansive. Now, I want to let you all know, if you enjoyed this interview, yeah, what I want you to do is I want you to send a dragon, right? Right? A dragon over to Mohsen. Man, I'm gonna fuck your name up, goddammit. I didn't say it enough during the interview. Yeah, look, I see you giggling about it. Whatever. Yeah. Fucking it's spelled right down there. Right down no shit. Right down here over on his side. That shit's spelled out. You can Google him as well as you can click the links because you can be able to find him real quick, as well as all this work. Right. I want you to send him a dragon, right? With wait, where the fuck did it go? With small robots that transformed into jets? Wouldn't that be Transformers?
It's kind of what it is. So it's more like Robotech, if you ever watched that as a kid.
Well, find those. They used to sell them at Toys R Us. You ain't gonna be able to get that now because that bitch is like out of business.
No.
Right? You know, Amazon killed it. What are you gonna do? Maybe Walmart. I don't know. I don't know how long that company went out of business, right? But a dragon with a bunch of small robots that turn into jets, right? Send that his way. Now, if you didn't like this interview, man, I hate when someone answers that. I feel like a dick. I really do. I really, really, really do feel like a dick sending it that way. But it's what he said. So it's what I'm going to give you all the option of doing. Now, mind you, only do this if you didn't enjoy the interview. If you enjoyed the interview, like I said, dragon, robots that turn into fucking thing, and click all the links in the description. Make sure you check out Syphon, right? But if you didn't, I want you to send him a banshee. Just smelling of some just nasty ass fish. And, while you're at it, have her put Watchmen on repeat for him. The movie, not the TV series. That way you can torture him proper. Besides that, what I want you to do is 3 things, y'all. Right? Actually, make it 4. 1, remember, just like Image, this shit, it ain't your daddy's comic book podcast either, right? It's not. I promise you, for all you metahumans and mutants out there, it's how the fuck we do. I am the unknown factor, right? Give it that thumbs up. Get your Comic Con. Have a good night, y'all.
Hey, this is Jim Valentino here on QUESTionnaire.
What's going on? I'm Fred Kennedy.
This is Nick Marinkovich.
I'm Vladimir Popov, colorist of a bunch of cool indie comic books for a bunch of cool indie publishers like Dark Horse, Boom Studios, World Comics, Z2 Comics, IDW, Heavy Metal, and others.
I am the artist from Dead Romans. Make sure to check it out. It's out now.
Writer of Dead Romans.
From Image Shadowline.
And the fan-made Star Wars radio play, Mud 79.
Buy comics from Shadowline, Image, and everybody else. Buy stuff you like.
I really had a great time on this podcast.
Join us every single week.
And make sure you're watching the QUESTionnaire podcast.
Spidey sense just goes off and you really don't know why.
Thank you, everybody, for watching.
And be sure to catch the QUESTionnaire
every week at 7.
He nailed it. First try.
What can they say?
I will drop it like it's hot because I've been told that that's what I'm supposed to do.
Wow. That's another party.
Oh, shit.